All right, ladies and gentlemen, what we're going to talk about today is we're going to continue with our series on Mother's Day. Previously, we released the first video, and that was about mindset, because the four pillars of fighting are mindset, tactics, skill, and gear. And today what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you my opinion on what James meant and what we mean by tactics. Tactics. So the hierarchy, what is most important? Mindset. Mindset is most important. And what did we determine last week or last time? Last time we determined that mindset is the most important because mindset is what forces you, allows you, requires you to make decisions. Mindset says, what is my goal? All right. A proper mindset says, what is my goal and what do I hope to accomplish? We establish that. And then once we've established what our goal is, then we have to think about how are we going to accomplish that goal? How are we going to accomplish the goal? And one of the ways we're going to accomplish the goal is through tactics. Tactics is kind of a broad topic. It's actually a very broad topic, and it's also very misunderstood. Now, we have to establish goals first before we adopt tactics or adapt our methods to whatever we're going to do. So let's say use of cover. We talked about this in brief during the mindset portion. What is the most important thing in a gunfight for you, the end user? What is the most important thing? Is it shooting the bad guy or is it not getting shot? And you're like, well, people think about it, they're not getting shot? Yes. Not getting shot is more important than shooting the bad guy. Because as long as you continue to not be shot, you have options. You can make decisions. You can do different things. You have options. Once you become a shot human, you start running out of options. Your options diminish. Therefore, the primary goal for you in a gunfight is to not get shot. Aha! Now, if we establish that as our primary goal, if our primary goal is to not get shot, then we adapt that to our tactics. For instance, in our school, in tactical response, we practice deliberately moving our feet, because one of the uses of cover, or the mantras of cover, or what do I want to say? When it comes to cover, if the gunfight begins and you are not behind cover, you need to move your feet, either towards cover or just keep moving until you win the fight. Don't stand still, okay? So a tactic is moving while you shoot. A tactic is moving while you shoot. A tactic is proper use of cover. Proper use of cover. And how do we use cover properly? That is a tactic. So the goal, mindset says, what is my goal? My goal is not to get shot. Okay. How can I apply tactics to not getting shot? Well, step one, if I realize that I'm in a life or death situation, if I realize that I am in a gunfight, well, then what I will do is I will begin to move. And I will do so immediately. Not later, but right now, as soon as I can. As soon as I realize that I have a deadly threat and I'm not behind cover, I move my feet, even before shooting or simultaneously to shooting. I don't shoot, and then think, okay, now I'm going to move. That is a tactic. Now, can tactics be skillful? Mindset, tactics, skill, gear. Yes. Tactics can be skillful, but generally, when we talk about skill, we're talking about the ability to manipulate the tools in a skillful manner, right? So with a tactic, move your feet. Tactic, use of cover. However, there are good tactics and there are poor tactics. Not everything that is, quote, a tactic or that is tactical is a good idea. Some things are bad ideas. For instance, we talked about it before. If you are using cover and you are engaging a lethal threat that has a firearm, and they're shooting bullets at you, and you lean out and you engage, and then you lean back in, you do something. Let's say you top off your gun or you clear it or you do something like that. Part of our tactics are never re-emerging where we just were. Because why? Because even a retarded monkey knows to look in the spot where you just were. So if you disappear, do whatever you need to do, and reappear immediately in that spot, the likelihood of you getting shot is extremely high, because that's where they're looking. So that is a tactic. Now, some people don't ever consider that because their training takes place in a sterile environment on a square range where they don't ever consider incoming rounds. And they'll say they do. They're like, oh, yeah, they say, I get it. Oh, yeah, we're practicing for the real thing, man. We're practicing for the real world. You're like, okay, then why are you having your students pop back and forth around cover like it's whack-a-mole, right? Why are you having them do that? Well, why are you having your students take their rifles or pistols or arms or whatever and lean on top of cover? Why are you having them extend their rifles beyond cover and lay on it? Because they get better shots that way. Their split times are better and they can get more accurate hits. Okay, cool. What was our pre-established goal? Our pre-established goal was to not get shot, right? So our tactics need to mirror our goals. You see, if you have an established goal and your tactics don't mirror or support that, then one of the two things is incorrect. Either the mindset or the goal is wrong, or the tactics are wrong. All right. How do we manipulate our firearms? Do we manipulate our firearms one-handed, two-handed, off-handed, and so forth? Skill. Now, using a firearm with your non-dominant hand is a skill, but it also can be a tactic. Use of cover is a tactic. Movement is a tactic. Getting down. The ability to go from standing up to flat down on the ground or kneeling or prone or what have you is a tactic. We need to figure out, if we're going to do that, how are we going to do it? Can we do that to help us achieve our goals? Goal number 1, don't get shot. Goal number 2, shoot bad guy. Does this tactic of laying on the ground in the fetal prone position, does it support that? Yes or no? Flashlights. A flashlight is gear, correct? Yes, a flashlight is gear. However, if I put my flashlight in my support hand, and as soon as I encounter a potential threat, I hit the threat directly in the face with bright light, that is a tactic. That is a tactic because I'm letting that person know. Let's say you're walking to your car and there is a creature between you and your vehicle, and it's dusk or dark. Let's say it's dark and it's street lights or pole lights in a parking lot or whatever. And you're walking to your car and you see creatures. Now you could choose to just turn around and run away, but you don't know just yet. Those creatures could be looking for their car, or maybe they're not. So you pull this out and you turn it on and you shine it in the direction that you are going. And they notice that. And then you know that they see you and they know that you see them. Okay, that is a tactic. That is a tactic. Employing white light to drive the way. That is a tactic. That is one tactic that you could use. There are lots of different tactics that are involved in what we do. However, we need to examine them periodically and say, okay, is this correct? Are we doing this right? Does this help us support our goal? Does it help us support our goal? For instance, when it comes to movement, if you start your gunfight not facing the threat, you're like, start my gunfight not facing the threat. Yeah, you are seated in a chair in the Trolley Square Mall in Salt Lake City, Utah. You guys probably don't remember this because it's all of 10 or 15 years ago. During the reign of Comrade Barry Soetoro, we had a lot of lone wolf jihadists murdering American citizens. And in Salt Lake City, a lone wolf jihadist walked into the mall deciding he was going to kill the infidel. There was an off-duty police officer and his wife, who also happened to be a dispatcher, eating dinner in the mall when that began, right? So they're completely separate. What they hear is gunfire and screaming. Gunfire and screaming. They don't see the threat. So what he has to do is two things. Number one, he stands up, he is armed, and he tells his wife, call 911, tell him who I am and what I look like, because he's not dressed like a police officer right then, right? He's dressed like a citizen. Tell him who I am and what I'm dressed like. I'm going to take this, and I'm going to go get between whatever that is, the bad person or people or whatever. I'm going to go do that until the guys in uniform show up. And that's what he did. Now, the tactic that he employed was to put bullets into the direction of the jihadist. And you're like, I don't even remember this, Paul. Yeah, because the United States news media is run by communists and socialists. And they're not going to remind you about all the lone wolf jihadi attacks that took place, because that doesn't support their narrative. Their mindset is citizens with guns are bad, and if we can't support that narrative, we don't talk about it. But it happened in Salt Lake City at the Trolley Square Mall. Look it up. Now, the off-duty officer was able to locate where the gunfire was coming from, where Johnny Jihad was, and start putting bullets into his direction, so that he was forced to stop killing innocent people and address him. And by that time, about the time that was going on, uniformed officers showed up, and they were able to eliminate the threat. That is a tactic. So how do we face our threat? Let's say that the gunfight begins, but the threat's not right in front of us. How do we get to it? Well, the first thing you have to do is turn your head, right? You have to practice turning your head. Thinking with a gun in your hand. That's partly skill, but it's also partly tactic. Having the ability to make good decisions under stress in a rapid manner is something that has to be practiced. It's something that has to be practiced. We don't have the need to or the time to get into every single tactic there is. But I'm going to get into one right here. And that is how we manipulate our firearms. Now you say, well, that's skill. Yes, it is. Manipulating your firearm is skill. However, from a tactical standpoint, is it better as a human being to teach yourself and to practice one way to accomplish 3 goals? Or is it better to teach yourself and practice 3 ways to accomplish 1 goal? And you're like, I think I know the answer that you want, Paul. I think I know the answer that you want. Do you think you do? Okay. Well, when it comes to the human animal and efficiency, that's another thing about tactics. Well, tactics and skill kind of mesh together, but efficiency, right? If I practice manipulating a firearm in a certain way and it allows me to accomplish 3 different goals, is it better for me to do that or to come up with 3 different ways to solve 1 problem? Well, the answer is obviously for the human being, and because the mind and body are working together, it's better to master 1 way that will solve. If I had 1 answer that would solve 3 questions or answer 3 questions, wouldn't that be better? Yes, it would. Yes, it would. So people say, well, clearing firearms. I'll give you a great one. Sports. And this is mindset, tactics, and skill. So way back in the old days, when we wore woodland camouflage and Kevlar, big old Kevlar helmets and flak jackets, and we used M16A2 rifles. And we use those. We went to the range and they taught us about stoppages. And they taught us that a stoppage is any unintended interruption in the cycle of operation of the firearm. Okay. At any point in time, if the cycle of operation, and there's 8 steps in the cycle of operation, if any of those are interrupted, that is a stoppage. If the machine, in this case an M16A2, breaks, if something in the machine breaks, that is a malfunction. Okay. A stoppage, for instance, a type 1 stoppage is when you assume or think that there's a cartridge loaded in the chamber and you press the trigger and it goes click instead of boom. That's not a malfunction. That's a stoppage. Okay. It's an interruption in the cycle of operation. A type 2, you shoot, and a piece of brass, rather than being ejected fully, gets caught in the ejection port and it stops the action from closing. A type 2 stoppage or stovepipe is not a malfunction. It's an interruption in the cycle of operation. All right. So, way back when, on the Marine Corps rifle range, right? And I got really good training with the Marine Corps, but this situation in particular proves that sometimes we need to rethink things. So they taught us sports, S-P-O-R-T-S, and sports stood for, if you experience a stoppage, right? Slap the magazine, boom. P, pull on the charging handle, okay? And you wouldn't let it go. Pull on the charging handle. O, observe the ejection port, okay? Release the charging handle. We're doing all this, so of course we're switching hands because we really weren't very tactical back then. We're switching hands. Tap the forward assist. So now we're release, tap, and then the final S is attempt to shoot, right? So S-P-O-R-T-S. Now, if you guys are still with me and you know your AR-15, M16 style rifles, you're like, okay, well, if you had a type 1, click, no boom. There's ammo in the magazine, but there's no ammo in the chamber. So we sports that sucker, right? We slap the magazine, pull, observe, release, tap, attempt to shoot. Will that fix it? Probably yes. 999 times out of 1,000, that's going to fix it, right? Let's say a type 2. A type 2 is a feedway obstruction, also known as a stovepipe. All right? So you sports it, man. Now, the thing that sports ignores is it ignores gravity. Because if you have a piece of brass or an object, something that's in the ejection port, you want it to go away. You want it to fall onto the ground, right? So what we teach is that when you're clearing your guns, the ejection port should be down. So that if there's anything in there that you don't want to be in there, gravity will make it fall out, not fall back in. Of course, if you are observing the ejection port, then actually what you're doing is you're putting it upwards and gravity's not helping you. However, let's say you sports the stovepipe, right? I never had a stovepipe stoppage. I never actually had any stoppages at all when I was on Parris Island, when I was doing my rifle qualification. Never had a stoppage, never had sports anything, but they taught us about it. So, type 2, slap, pull, observe, release, tap, attempt to shoot. All right, that'll probably fix it. There you go. A type 3, what is a type 3? You smart guys out there, you people who've taken training, or at least read articles and books, you know that a double feed is a type 3. That's when you either have two pieces of live ammunition that are both trying to occupy the chamber at the same time, or, excuse me, let me have a drink for a second, or you have a spent piece of ammunition, a casing, and then you have a live cartridge trying to get into the chamber. Either way, the chamber only holds one cartridge at a time, right? It's not going to hold two. So what you have now is you have the recoil spring and the buffer assembly, shoving the power of the recoil spring, shoving those two objects into the chamber. And it's not going to work. Your gun is not going to work, your rifle's not going to work until you clear out that traffic jam, right? You believe me. You're like, yeah, Paul, I believe you. Okay, cool. So, let's say I have a type 3 stoppage, a double feed, and I slap the magazine, pull the charging handle, observe, release, and tap the forward assist. Will I be able to fire that rifle? You guys are like, no, because what you just did won't clear a double feed. You're right, it won't. Because applying sports will not clear a double feed. All that junk is still in there, right? All that junk is still trying to get into the chamber. It didn't clear it. What do I have to do? If I have an AR-15, M16, M4 style rifle, the first thing I got to do is get the spring tension off of the bolt carrier so that it stops trying to jam that garbage into the chamber. Well, nowhere in sports does it say, lock that thing open, man. It doesn't say lock back the bolt carrier and take the spring tension off of the problem, does it? No. Does it say pull out the magazine? No, it doesn't say pull out the magazine. So, and a lot of you guys who are smart, you probably have already thought to yourself, well, a type 1 and a type 2, all you have to do is tap the magazine, pull the charging handle back vigorously as far back as you can, allow the buffers or the spring, the buffer spring, to send the bolt home at full force, and you should be good to go. That clears the type 1, clears the type 2, right? You don't need to look in the ejection port. You don't need to tap the forward assist. So sports, while it sounds cool, because we can teach 18-year-old Marines and soldiers and sailors and airmen, and we can teach them, all right, when it comes to clearing, if you encounter a stoppage, well, I'm going to teach you how to clear a stoppage. You're going to apply sports. Wow, that's a cool acronym. Let me tell you what it means. And I'm sure whoever came up with it got an Army Achievement Medal or a Navy Achievement Medal or something like that. It stands for slap, pull, observe, release, tap, attempt to shoot, right? So with sports as a tactic, and you're like, well, sports isn't really a tactic. It kind of is, because what it does is sports is either way too much, whether it's way too many steps to clear a type 1 and a type 2. You don't need all those steps. You're wasting time. Because, if someone's trying to make you a dead person and you have a gun that's not functioning, you either need to find a gun that's functioning, okay, or fix the gun that's in your hand. One of two things, right? And preferably get behind cover. So sports is either way more than you need or nowhere near enough steps, right? So for a type 1 and a type 2, sports is way too much. And for a type 3, it's nowhere near enough. So why in the world do we hammer it and hammer it and hammer it and hammer it? And we're like, sports, you need to apply sports. Well, because it's a cool acronym. It's in the 3-ring binder. We made posters that said sports on it. We put them up in the training rooms and stuff like that. And the guy who taught me sports, and the guy who taught him sports, and so on and so on and so forth. But no one ever stops and says, hey, maybe we need to think about this. I wrote an article about 14 years ago about sports, about how it's either way too much or not enough. And it's the acronym that we love that we just can't get rid of. We can't get rid of it because it's just too cool. Even though, if we look at it from a critical eye, it's not a good idea. Why would we want people in, that situation doing way more than necessary, adding extra steps, or put them in a position where we don't give them enough steps to fix the problem, as in a type 3. In a type 3, you don't have enough steps to fix the problem. Like I said, I never encountered a type 3 when I was on Paris Island, when I was in basic training. So I didn't learn that sports doesn't fix a type 3 because it never happened to me. So, and I'll give you another one when it comes to sports and clearing stoppages. Let's say that you practice, or you want to practice, or you plan to. If you have a long gun in your hands, you will also have a handgun attached to your body. A handgun, right? This is the M9 Beretta. Yes, this is a genuine M9. It's not a Model 92, it's an M9. So, if you have a live functioning handgun on your body, it's loaded and it's ready to go, and you have a rifle on your body, and you attempt to fire your rifle, and your rifle doesn't make noise when it's supposed to. It either starts making noise and then quits, or it doesn't make any noise at all. Now, we talked about type 1, 2, and 3, but there are other things that can make your rifle stop working. A bolt override, though horrible and rare, will make your gun not work anymore until you take it apart and clean it. If you're using gun shop or gun show reloads, or you just reload your own, as often as not, you will get these things called blown primers. Primers will blow out of the back of the case, and they will drop down into the action of your rifle. Do I need to tell you? Well, I'll go ahead and tell you. If a primer gets underneath the hammer spring, you're going to have problems. You're like, what? How would a primer get under the hammer spring? Well, where's it going to go? There's only so many. If you have a primer blow out during extraction, during the firing cycle, it's going to fall down into your action. And if it gets in spring, it'll make your gun stop working until you clear it out. Sometimes bolts break. Firing pins don't break that often, but bolts sometimes do. Extractors sometimes break. If an extractor breaks, you can sports that gun until you die, and that thing is not going to work properly. Okay? So my point is, if you're cruising along with your rifle and you're engaged in a lethal force encounter, you're engaged in mortal combat, right? And either the gun goes boom, 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 makes noise, and then just stops, just quits, right, in the middle. Now, here's the thing. If you've got a 30-round magazine in your gun, you're like, well, I know, I might have fired all 30 rounds and I might be empty. Really? It went pow, pow, nothing. Do you really think you fired 30 rounds? Also, the more experience you have with your rifle, the better you will know how it sounds and feels. We need to listen to our guns, and we need to learn how they feel when they're operating. When an AR-15, those with experience with M4s, AR, stoner-based rifles, when the bolt carrier doesn't go back into battery, unless you're a neophyte, you know, because you felt it, because it had a different feel. If it doesn't strip a cartridge out of the magazine, it sounds different, right? So there I am in the middle of a Mortal Kombat situation with a gun, with a rifle that is not making noise. What should I do? What should I do? From a tactical standpoint, I can do one of two things. I can either try and find cover or really quickly try and clear the stoppage and then figure out if that works. Now, if that doesn't work, then I know that I have to go down here and grab this and launch smaller bullets, smaller, slower bullets, or bigger, heavier, slower bullets, or whatever, at the bad guy, right? Maybe your stoppage clearing will work, but maybe it won't. What do you do if it doesn't? Well, do you guys remember when we first, way back in the old days, I'm sure that everybody who's watching me now is down with tourniquets, right? You're like, yeah, as soon as I see red stuff coming out of a limb, if I see red stuff coming out of a limb, if there's a hole in your limb or my limb, there's a tourniquet going on that sucker. I'm not going to, remember the old, tourniquet is a last resort after all the other things have failed and yada, yada, yada. Last resort after all the other means have failed, right? You guys remember that. Well, what was that? If someone has a compromised artery in their leg or arm, and you did the old advice, you tried to do direct pressure, you tried to elevate the limb, you tried to find a pressure point, you did a bunch of stuff, and none of it worked. And they're like, okay, I tried all that stuff, it didn't work, the blood's still coming out, I better go find a rag and a stick, right? By the time you find the rag and find the stick and put it on, chances are really high that they've already bled to the point of irreversible shock. The old way of thinking proved to be, and we figured this out the first couple of years of GWAT, the old way of thinking, the old tactic of do all this other stuff first, then do a tourniquet, that tactic caused a lot of good people to die. A lot of soldiers and Marines and so forth that would not have died if a tourniquet would have been applied immediately, did die because our tactics sucked. Okay? Our tactics sucked. So, when it comes to transitioning from a downed long gun to a loaded and ready handgun, should I transition first, and then after I've taken care of the problem, fix my rifle? Or should I try, like the old tourniquet advice, to do all the other stuff first, and then and only then, after I figure out that that didn't work, then go for the gun? Well, why am I transitioning to that gun? Am I playing a game on the range? Or is this situation a Mortal Kombat, lethal combat situation? If you should be throwing rounds down range and you stop, you immediately lose the momentum in a gunfight. And maintaining the momentum in a gunfight is a tactic. So, when it comes to tactics, what is more effective? If I have a long gun and it stops making noise unexpectedly, immediately transition to a loaded and ready handgun and maintain the momentum and keep shooting, or stand here and try and figure out what's going on. I don't care how fast you can tap rack. It doesn't matter. It's immaterial. Because if the tap rack doesn't work, you just wasted time. Instead, you could have used the time to get that pistol out. That is a tactic. So when it comes to our goal, what is our goal? Not to get shot first, shoot the bad guy second. So how can I accomplish that? Well, and you say, all right, well, but the threat is 275 yards away inside that building. All right, fine. Find cover and fix your rifle. If the threat is 25 yards away, then you better get that handgun out or you're going to get shot. See, that is a tactic. And these are the things we have to think about. So when it comes to tactics, in the 4 pillars of fighting, tactics are more important than gear, and they are more important than skill, and tactics are determined by your proper fighting mindset. I'm Paul Markel with Student of the Gun, and this has been The 4 Pillars of Fighting by James Yeager.